And on today's show, how asset protection could be a differentiator in your practice. Part one of this week's series on business asset protection with author and attorney Ike Devji. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to the show, Ike.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Well, I've had you on before, and I've been reading some of your articles, not only on some of the online websites like Producers Web and some of the places you and I play, but also you're in medical journals and professional magazines. You're always writing about asset protection. I mean, I keep thinking, how big is the litigation atmosphere in the United States? It must be huge.
It is, Steve, and there are a number of different variables out there that contribute to the exposure that both the advisors that you and I work with and the clients that we work with are facing. One of the main problems that we have is that litigation is a business, like any other business, like selling cars or selling insurance or anything else. And we have to protect our clients from that business, which unfortunately in this country right now produces about 70,000 lawsuits a day.
A day?
A day.
That's way more than I thought. Yours not 70,000 now, because some are frivolous, I'm sure, but still.
Absolutely.
But still, they're filing it.
They're filing it, and remember that even a frivolous lawsuit has to be defended in most cases. So just the cost of defense can easily be 6 figures. In fact, the average cost of defending against a frivolous lawsuit produces about $91,000 in legal fees alone.
Well, when I think about how to defend our practice, our businesses, there are a lot of areas that we're going to talk about all this week that really, I have to say, were, when I first interviewed you, those were absolutely new. Now I know because we've talked before and I've read some of your articles. One of the things I want to talk about right away is when I'm trying to put together a team, a legal defense team to write my errors and omissions or my director's insurance or whatever insurance and things that we're going to talk about throughout this week, what am I looking for when I'm trying to put my team together? I'm thinking, well, you got to have a financial advisor. He's got an issue. He's bringing you to the table. Who else do I have to have when I want to meet my defense team?
Well, I think the biggest part of defense is, number one, having the right kinds of insurance. So that means working with an experienced P&C agent who knows not only the basics of insuring someone as an individual. That's what we would typically refer to in our home and auto policies and that kind of umbrella coverage, which is essential. But working with someone who has a good understanding of 4 or 5 core areas of specialty insurance that include employment practices liability, data breach or what's known as cyber liability insurance, D&O insurance, which is directors and officers. There are a number of these things that fall through the cracks of the big policies or the umbrellas that most people think that they're protected by.
So when we talk about having a conventional PUP policy, no matter how large it is, it may not be covering these areas that you're addressing.
That's absolutely correct. And I actually have 2 different articles out there that on first glance might seem to conflict each other. One of the articles that I've written talks about how the umbrella policy, as most consumers describe it, is this sort of warm, gentle, overreaching arc that protects you from everything. And in my experience, what umbrella means to the insurance carrier is specific events in the base policy covered to specific increased limits with a very specific list of exclusions. Now that's quite a bit different from the consumer's view of umbrella, right? And what we need to understand is that those kinds of personal liability policies are typically limited to a couple of core areas of exposure, primarily your home and auto, and they won't cover a lot of these things that are unrelated, at least at least in some tenuous sense, to those 2 core areas. So for instance, you can have a great personal liability umbrella, but if you as a financial advisor got your computers hacked and had your patient or your client's financial data and social security and account numbers exposed, that umbrella is not going to help you.
Well, let's talk, when we're looking, our audience, of course, financial advisors, most of them are not property casualty. So I see 2 plays here right away, which is we're going to be talking about this all week, bringing new ideas to help you penetrate the business market. These are really good ideas, and I think some good gatekeeper ability to get past the gatekeeper on, because we're bringing up anomalous issues that I don't think anybody else is bringing up. But also, we're going to need to find and put on our team a really good, intelligent property casualty agent who plays in this realm.
That is absolutely one of the team members that you asked about.
Well, now when we're talking about attorneys, and we're vetting, Is there a certain type of attorney like yourself? You really, I mean, this is your forte. You really are niche into asset protection. Do I need to look at that as an advisor to partner with somebody like you? What are my requirements when I'm looking for somebody that really plays in the area? Because all this week, all this has to do with us bringing our clients to really qualified PC agents and vetting our attorneys, because this is going to expose a lot of product sales, which is the biggest issue why we're doing this whole thing for all of this week.
Sure, sure. There are some special qualifications I think you should look for when you're looking for an asset protection attorney in particular, which I think is your question. Number one, and we actually have a whole article that we've written on this that I'll give you the link so you can share with your viewers, because due diligence in selecting any kind of counsel is really the first step.
Well, when you say due diligence, so you have a kind of a ranking or a kind of a chronology to go down?
I have a list of questions that I've created, and I create these lists because clients come back to me and continually want help and want specific questions to ask. So I have one on how to buy life insurance, how to pick a lawyer, how to pick a financial advisor. So I create these short guides for my clients to help them. And we have one specifically on picking asset protection counsel.
Well, we come back from the break in about 30 seconds. Let's go down that list and see what you say.
You bet.
Back in the day, life insurance professionals were called field underwriters. Then, carriers trained their field force in the basics of life insurance underwriting. Today, the insurance industry doesn't educate the agent population as they once did. But now you can have the Informed Risk Guide at your fingertips so you can illustrate a reasonable rate class for your life insurance prospects. Just request your copy of the Informed Risk Guide at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. It's free from Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, Ike, we're talking about some of the little things that you have on your list. I love all these lists, and I'm hopefully maybe you'll share that with our audience. Just send them to me, and I'll put them on as attachments to the show.
My pleasure.
Tell me what I'm doing to vet a guy like yourself, because this is not a traditional estate attorney. This is not I'm getting a will and a trust. We're talking about very defensive postures proactively. So talk a little bit about who I'm looking for.
Sure. And, you know, there are, obviously estate planning is important. And some of the tools that we as asset protection attorneys, for instance, use do overlap with some of the estate planning tools. But the first thing is to understand the difference between estate planning and asset protection planning. And the way that I explain it is that estate planning is death planning. Who gets my stuff when I die, at what tax treatment, at what level of privacy, at what probate cost, delay, and expense, right? We understand that. And that's pretty common, and most of the people who walk in to see someone like me have that basic estate planning in place. The asset protection planning, on the other hand, is the life planning. How do we make sure that all of the things that our clients have worked so hard for get to stay with them in their business and in their family? How do we segregate risk? How do we protect them from litigation? How do we protect them from the normal course of exposures that they would have in their business that we're going to talk about insuring them against? So that knowledge, I think, requires a little bit of litigation experience that maybe an estate planner, a conventional, traditional estate planner, as good as they might be and as much expertise as they have in the area of tax law, might not have. The second thing I warn people about is to actually, when people say, well, how do you pick an asset protection lawyer? I said, step one, pick a lawyer. One of the problems that we find out there is that many people who are promoting themselves as asset protection planners may not actually be attorneys. In that case, what we're dealing with is a legal services promoter who has no professional responsibility, who has no professional licensing, who has no professional accountability or malpractice insurance in place in many cases, and most importantly from my perspective, with whom you have no attorney-client privilege. So every email, every phone call, every contract that went back and forth between you and that non-attorney asset protection planner is discoverable by the court system. Now, if that person had dealt with an attorney, on the other hand, that communication would have been privileged. The next thing that would be on my list would be to look at something like the actual experience of the planner. What does this planner do? Is this someone who is a business attorney or litigation attorney or estate planning attorney who does a few asset protection cases a year? Or is this the focus of their practice? And has that focus included them understanding all of the elements of risk that you and I are going to be talking about this week? And that doesn't always translate from the estate planning side. An estate planner might not have the background and the education to understand what the current, for instance, employment litigation landscape looks like, or what drug compliance issues are going to do to one of our clients' medical practices, or how HIPAA exposures could wipe the average successful doctor out if they had a big exposure. So those are all the things that we as asset protection attorneys need to know about every kind of business our client is in.
That's a really small sector of the attorney market then.
It is. It is. You know, I've been doing this one thing every day for the last 10 years. Before that, I was what I sort of euphemistically referred to as the bad guy. I was the litigation attorney. And I do understand what attorneys want, how they're trained to look at every defendant as an opportunity for themselves and their law firm, and a business opportunity for the person that they represent. We are trained to look at everyone as a target. And I think that that training and that background makes many of the good asset protection attorneys even better at what they do.
What we're doing this week is methodically going through some of the uncommon experiences of our financial advisors who really don't understand asset protection from a living defensible position. And I see so many products that can be brought to bear from their point of view once you've identified the exposure to really help protect. I think we can expand our practice by using this.
Absolutely. In fact, I work, you know, when we're talking about advisors, I work with some of the top broker-dealers in the country, as you know, and help advisors understand and integrate this concept and this intention into the good work they're already doing. Many of the people who are watching this, who are your fans and viewers who are in the financial services business, sell life insurance and annuities. I don't sell either. I don't sell any financial products. But I am responsible for a lot of those things being sold because I tell clients to have that conversation with their advisor. And we train advisors to look at not just the return, but also the other opportunities that an annuity, for instance, might present where it's creditor protected by law in many cases. Or life insurance. You know, you and I have talked many times about exemption planning, right? And we talk about the conventional things like putting things in qualified plans or ERISA plans that are protected by law, or looking at issues like homestead. But we can do the same kind of homestead planning with the cash value of life insurance. About 28 states in this country protect life insurance cash values to an unlimited dollar amount. And in our current hostile litigation environment and in a zero return environment for people sitting on cash, it's a conversation that maybe advisors should be having more.
We're going to talk about that whole issue of life insurance as a major asset protection play later on in the week. Well, that's our show for today. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas you hear on our show, always consult your tax advisor, your legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. And don't forget, you can view all our past episodes at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. And remember, you could be wiser as an Ash Brokerage advisor. We'll see you tomorrow.